I'm pleased to be here today to give an overview on considerations for either growing your business using an ESOP or exiting your business. And we'll talk a little bit about succession planning and how that could relate to an ESOP and selling your company to your employees. So if you have any questions, we'll have time at the end for questions. Unfortunately, this webinar tool does not allow us to have a live dialogue. So if you have a question, please use the chat box or the Q&A box. Camille will moderate that, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. In addition, you can always reach out to me at any time, and I'd be happy to have a follow-up conversation or answer any questions that you may have. So ESOP Builders. So the ESOP Association is a nonprofit association, member-based. ESOP Builders is a member of that association, and ESOP Builders has been around for about 20 years, providing services to small and medium-sized Canadian companies that are interested in implementing some sort of employee share ownership plan within their company. So we work with architectural firms, we work with food companies, we work with construction companies and everything in between. And so really a diverse set of companies that we work with. And what's really great about ESOPs in Canada is that we can design an ESOP to basically suit your company. And so that's where our services at ESOP Builders comes in handy, is that we make sure that there's a fit between what you as the owner of the company is looking for and what your employees are interested in, and making sure that there's a match between your interest and your employees' interests. So that's the work we do. So I am representing ESOP Builders today. As Camille mentioned, I also am a business owner and have been part of I was the manager of a worker-owned company for over 10 years. So I have a deep experience in owning a business, in running and owning an employee-owned company, and I understand all the ins and outs of that. So I bring a lot of experience to this table. So we'll jump in and give you an overview of what that looks like. So, what is an ESOP? As a definition, an employee share ownership plan is a formal plan that's made available to eligible employees of a company that allows them to benefit in the long-term value growth of the business through the purchase of an ownership interest. So really the key here is that, this is a legalized document. You'll have a shareholders agreement that reflects this formal plan. And it's really giving your employees an ownership stake in the company, so sharing the ownership of the company with them. In essence, this gives employees a stake in the company that they work for. And, for you as the entrepreneur, you're no longer the sole person benefiting in both the risks and the rewards that accrue to that company. And having owned companies, I know it can be lonely on both sides. It can be lonely as an entrepreneur when, you are facing a lot of risks as a business owner personally. But then it can also be lonely when you have great successes and you're not really able to share that with your employees. They don't feel connected to those successes in the way that you do. So I personally find selling shares to employees and having them be owners in the company with you really creates a new dynamic that's quite powerful for companies. So there are 6 key reasons why businesses implement ESOPs. Most companies are looking to attract and retain talent. And interestingly, statistically, we're seeing that the millennial generation, which is of course where the up and coming workforce is coming from and where all new hires in most companies are coming from, the millennial generation is really not interested in just working for a company. That model of, working for a company, getting there and having a good salary and a good work environment, that's not really enough. The millennial generation wants more than that. And employee share ownership plans is a great way to address that. In addition, we also know that younger generations aren't staying in their work environments for as long as they used to. And so when people do have a stake in their company and they have that potential for long-term value growth, it's a great way to retain people and to keep them growing within the company and evolving. So that's one of the main reasons why we see companies looking to implement an ESOP. In addition, there's a lot of statistics, and I'll get into some of them shortly, that show that performance improves with the implementation of an ESOP. And quite simply, if you think about when you rent a home versus when you own a home and how differently you treat it, when you've got mice in your attic and you're renting, you might get around to calling your landlord. But when you have mice in your attic and you own your home, you're going to be pretty quick to get somebody in to sort that out for you or to sort it out yourself. And so it's the same with owning a company. If you're just going to work each day and getting a paycheck and not really invested in the long-term value growth and opportunity of the company, you're not going to care just quite as much or in the same way as if you're an owner in that company. And so it's really a way to incentivize performance. And it's a way for the owner to reward employees who are helping them build their company and to thank them for that contribution. It's also a way to share the success of the company. A lot of business owners, we all own businesses for different reasons. And seeing our business thrive usually makes us all pretty happy. And it's nice to share that success with others. So that's a big part of it. In some cases, companies implement an employee share ownership plan to raise capital to grow or expand their business. It could be used to basically sell off a division of your company. If you were looking to remove a portion of your company and create a division, you could sell that division to your employees. That could be one way to do that. And of course, what's becoming increasingly popular right now with a large conversion of business from the baby boomer generation is a succession planning tool. It provides a way for owners to think about selling their business that isn't necessarily just selling to a third party, but possibly selling to their employees. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So for me, I personally see implementing an ESOP as a way to create alignment in your company. It allows you to integrate your desire for your business success with your employees in a way that's meaningful and aligned. And to me, that's a big reason why we see employee-owned companies succeed. And so in 2011, Profit Magazine, they do these reports of the fastest growing companies. And of the 200 fastest growing companies in Canada, 40% of them in 2011 had some form of an ESOP. And so that really comes from when you align your business, your vision and your strategy with also your governance and your ownership structure. To me, you can go further faster. And as entrepreneurs, we often have difficulty going further faster with people. But ultimately, we also know that we benefit when we work together. And so we can see that in the statistics. A little bit on improved company performance. So the Employee Ownership Foundation, they did an annual economic survey of ESOP companies. And that survey showed that 93% of survey respondents reported that creating an employee ownership through an ESOP was a good business decision that benefited the company. 76% indicated that it positively affected the overall productivity of employees. And both profitability and revenue were up from previous years. 70% of respondents reported profitability had increased, and 76% had noted that revenue had increased. 80% of respondents stated that the company's stock value increased as determined by an outside independent valuation. So, I know personally as a business owner, those are all the kinds of numbers that I want to see in my business. I like to see those really positive numbers taking me in the right direction. And we often scratch our heads thinking about how we can get there with the tools and resources that we have. And an ESOP is a different tool that can help us achieve success. So a little bit on ESOPs and shared capitalism. Shared capitalism really means taking our current capitalist model, but thinking about how we broaden and expand that. And an ESOP is an excellent way to do that, and really a good example of shared capitalism. And in this 2011 study, it concluded that ESOPs improve the well-being of workers. It creates greater participation in decision-making within companies. It creates higher pay, benefits, and long-term wealth. It leads to greater job security and satisfaction, and it increases the trust in the firm and the management. And for me, that's a big piece, because as a CEO of a company, I know my employees often didn't trust me, or they felt that I maybe had ulterior motives. in spite of how transparent I may have been with them. And to know that this implementing an ESOP can help improve that trust within the company and within management is that's a great asset that comes out of this tool. So a little bit about the economic shift ahead. In Canada, we know that the baby boomer generation has been the generation of the greatest entrepreneurs in the history of Canada. There are currently 1.2 million small and medium-sized enterprises in Canada, of which 60% are owned by baby boomers. And baby boomers defined as the age between 53 and 71 years. That represents 54% of our gross domestic product. That is a huge number. It's a huge number. And what we're looking at from Statistics Canada is that by 2022, which is only 5 years away, there's $3.7 trillion of assets to transfer from this baby boom entrepreneur generation to someone else. Who is that? Who are buying all those assets? And the current concern in the Canadian economy is that there are not enough younger generations, not enough people that are out there that are going to buy those businesses. So what's going to happen to that $3.7 trillion in assets? Well, right now, 51% of owners don't have a succession plan. And only 9% have a formal succession plan. So at ESOP Builders, we often ask people, like, what are you looking for in the long term? And can selling your business to your employees provide a long-term succession plan for you? And that's something that you want to be thinking about, not when you're 65 or 72, but when you're 55 and you think you've got another 5 to 10 years before you'd like to be doing other things. So this is and we'll talk a little bit more about what's involved. In terms of leaving a business legacy, again, as a business owner, I know that I personally have grown businesses not because I'm just looking to make money, but also because I want to leave a legacy behind. I want to know that the work that I've put in goes somewhere and has meaning down the road. And so in thinking about leaving your business, you need to exit. You need to get your money out. You need to make sure you have a good succession plan in place, so sustaining the company in the future. And for me, the biggest disappointment would be to sell my business or to transition my business to my employees and to not have it succeed, because when you've put in 5, 10, 15, 20 years building something, you want to know that it's going to endure. And then the legacy, preserving your core values. And all too often when we sell to a third party, those core values are hard to integrate and to maintain. And so this is, again, where selling to your employees who share those values with you may be a good way to preserve that legacy. So a few stats on selling your company. 12 months after the sale of a company, 75% of business owners regret selling their business. And that has a lot to do with, what your expectations were when you started the negotiations and then how things unfold. Usually where you start and where you finish in the negotiation of a sale to a third party is quite different. Usually you're left with, you may be left with a decent amount of money, but, have the values transitioned? Is your business in the place that you wanted it to be? Those are difficult things. Typically, only 50% of sales to third parties are successful. So you have a 1 in 2 chance that if you sell to a third party, your business will sustain. Only 1 in 4 companies will be successfully sold. And then of those, many will be restructured and the culture changed. So integrated into another company, downsized, moved somewhere else. However, 80% of sales to employees are successful. So if you are thinking of a succession plan for your company, it's worth exploring what it could look like to sell your business to your employees. So, right now, if you're thinking about where do you sell your company, you could sell to a family member. You could sell to existing shareholders if you have other shareholders in your company with you. You could sell to a competitor or a third party. You could close the doors. And I live in Ottawa, and recently we've seen a lot of really great companies close their doors. And, you know, every time I see that happen, I think, oh, there was another way. They could have explored some other options, because those businesses were important to the community. They were important to the employees that worked there. And so I think that's, from an economic perspective in Canada, that's one of the things we want to make sure we don't see, of that 3.7 trillion in assets, that a lot of those don't end up closing their doors because there isn't a market to buy those companies. You could look at a management buyout, and I'll talk a little bit about a difference between management buyout and an ESOP in a minute, or you could look at an employee share ownership plan. Or if your company is in that position, you could look at a public offering, but that's potentially you're there, but it's a different ball game. One of the other options is you could defer the sale. So basically try and hire someone to manage the company in the way that you would, so that you could retire. Again, though, it's, you know, you're going to still be involved. That may not be the transition that you're looking for. It depends on what you're looking for. Or you could sell the assets. So why consider an ESOP for succession? The business transition success rates. If you transition to a family member, businesses tend to only succeed about 30% of the time. If I think about transitioning my company right now to my kids, I have a hard time imagining how that would go. If you transition to another company, as I mentioned before, it's only a 1 in 2 success rate, and to your employees, it's 80%. So it just gives you a better chance of seeing your business endure over the long term. So a little bit about a management buyout versus an ESOP and what the difference is. So in a management buyout, 100% of the shares and control are sold at once. There's no disclosure of financial information to competitors, because you're selling to your managers, to your key employees. You are creating a culture of employee engagement in a management buyout, which will increase the value. That will inherently change the input that your employees have, the managers have in a company. And it provides a quick exit for owners, but it does not allow the owner flexibility in timing. And it may be difficult to make that culture shift, because it's a one-time exit. It may be difficult to really transition those cultural pieces over to the management team that's buying the company. In the case of an ESOP, as the owner, you have the flexibility on when you want to transition out of the company, and you can do it gradually. So I was recently working with an owner who's 55, and he said, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years, I'd like to see myself transition out of this company. And so he started selling 20% of the shares in the company to his employees in the first 4 years. And then after 4 years, he'll evaluate and see what the next portion will be that he'll sell to his employees. And it gives him a way to think about a staggered exit and a staggered retirement from the company. It also then gives your employees time to step into the shoes that you've worn as the entrepreneur. And as the entrepreneur, we tend to do many, many things that can't be transitioned over into one person. So it gives you an opportunity to slowly integrate your role into the roles of many other people within your company. Because you're selling to your employees, you don't have to disclose financial information to your competitors, which is of value to you to continue your competition in the market. It creates a culture of employee engagement, which will increase the value. There may be a difficulty in culture shift, but because you have more time to do it, it gives you time to transition. And a key person ESOP, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, can function like a management buyout, but with having the timing staggered to suit what you need as the owner. So a few considerations in decision making on, if an ESOP is right for you. It's always really important to think about what your goals are. What are your financial goals and personal goals? What do you need for your family? What does a succession plan look like? How quickly do you want to exit your company? It's really important that you take all those things into consideration. What's your role as the owner during the transition? How involved are you? How are you handing over? Those pieces are really important to think about. What are the employees' goals? What do they want to see in the long term? And in particular, the key employees that you think are going to grow and evolve the company over time. What's the employees' willingness to invest? Are your employees interested in buying shares in your company? If they are, great. If they're not, then an ESOP won't be a good option for you. But if they are, then you have a great possibility there. There's also the question of employees' ability to invest, and there are 8 different ways to finance an ESOP. And often I speak with owners who say, well, you know, my employees, they're young, they're buying houses, they're not really going to be able to participate. And I always give the example that I bought shares in the company I was working for the first time when I was 30 years old, bought my first house, was having my first child, and I still found the money to buy shares in the company because it was important to me. And I knew that it would create an opportunity for over the long term. So don't underestimate or don't stop yourself because you think that maybe your employees won't have the money or to invest in an ESOP, because I personally know from experience that that's not necessarily the case. And what's your vision for the company? Where do you want to see the company go? Who's going to help you take it there? So it's really important that you select the right type of ESOP. Now we say ESOP, but really there's 3 types for your company. There's equity shares, and so that's shares. So as the owner, if you hold 100% of the common shares of the company, you would allocate a portion of those to your employees. You could do that as a same class of shares that you hold or a different class of shares. There's lots of different ways you can do that, but basically transitioning ownership in the company through shareholding to your employees. You could implement a stock option plan, which is basically a future share purchase at a price calculated in the present day, which gives your employees the right to future ownership. That's an option. Or you could look at equity value units, which is also known as phantom stock, which mirrors stock options, but there's never a legal transfer of ownership. And so within these 3 components, these 3 options, as a business, you can explore which one is the right one for you. And one of the things that we do at ESOP Builders is we help you assess, your needs and your company's needs and your employees' needs, and then find the right plan for your company, whether that be shares, stock options, or phantom stock. So a few other things to consider in design. The type of ESOP that you're going to implement. So, you have the stock option, the shares, or the phantom plan, that being one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is who's participating in the plan. Is this a broad-based plan that, which means everyone in your company has access to, based on once they've been with the company for a certain amount of time as determined by you? Or is this a plan that's really for your key employees, however you define that? And that's one of the considerations in designing your ESOP. In the design, it's really important that you make it tax effective for both yourself as the owner and also for your employees. And there are one of the things, again, we do at ESOP Builders is we help you to make sure it is tax effective. You need to know how the share purchase will be financed. And so, as I mentioned, there are 8 different ways to finance a share purchase. And I won't get into those today, but those are things we could have a conversation about in the future. You want to think about what is the percentage ownership and control and over what period of time. So as the owner, how many shares are you willing to give up? What percentage control over how much time? Those are things you want to be clear about in the design of an ESOP for your company. What's the time frame? How are you rolling this out? Within an ESOP, so because there's no setting up an ESOP, and the shares in an ESOP are not the same, they're not publicly traded. It's not like buying shares in a publicly traded company. So the value of the shares isn't based on demand for the shares. It is based on a valuation that's done by a third-party valuator, though. And so our recommendation is that you would do a valuation and that the valuator would provide a formula for you to use for a couple of years after the initial valuation, as long as there wasn't any significant material change in the company, like if you bought a new division, for example, and that you would renew that valuation every 3 years. And that would give you, excuse me, that would provide you with your fair market value and therefore your share price for your employees. And then, of course, the legal requirements. So you would need a shareholders agreement that governs your plan, and that would need to represent all of these different elements. And then, most importantly, from our perspective at ESOP Builders, when you are implementing an ESOP, especially if you've been a fairly traditionally run company where, the owner or senior management doesn't disclose a lot of information and keeps things kind of under wraps, there is a culture shift that's required to really bring your company into that space of shared employee ownership and entrepreneurialism as well. And so it's one of the things that we do at ESOP Builders is we help companies make that culture shift. So key success factors, communication and education are huge. I've had conversations with companies who have implemented a key person ESOP, and it wasn't clear to the managers of the company that were buying shares what that meant. And so it really led to a lot of confusion because they weren't clear on, what does this mean to be buying shares in the company? How does this change my stake in the company? How does this change my role on a day-to-day management basis? And so those communication and education components are really, really important. And I strongly recommend that if you are considering an ESOP, that you spend the time. It's worth the time getting it really clear for everyone involved so that you don't run into headaches down the road because it wasn't clear and well communicated to your employees. You want to make sure you have solid legals that support the design of your ESOP. So you want to make sure all of the clauses are included so that you as the owner are protected and your employees are protected. You want to make sure there's a cultural integration, and this comes out of the communication and education, but it also comes in changing how your company functions. And in some cases, that may be sharing your financial information with your employees. Because if you're not doing that, and you want your employees to contribute to the success, then sharing, top line financial information and broad number financials, not the details and the nitty gritty, but the big picture items will help your employees make strategic decisions that will help you grow your company and improve your profitability. And we consistently see that. And so that's part of the cultural integration that needs to take place. The owners need to support an ESOP, and if you are multiple owners in a company and one owner does not support it, it will likely be difficult. So it's really important that there's buy-in from all the owners for this to succeed. Financial disclosures, a key success factor. So your employees need to know what the share value is. They need to know how that share value will increase over time. And so that leads to the need for financial disclosure in order to enable success. You want to make sure you have a keen employee group, that they're capable and supportive and that they're going to take this on and that they're interested in doing so. The company needs to be in a place of having a history of success and profits. We don't, at ESOP Builders, it's, we're never encouraged by a company that's on a downward trend that wants to sell shares to the employees. That feels like maybe a bit of a bad deal. Although there are lots of case examples of companies that have been on a downward trend who have sold the shares to their employees, and there has been a turnaround. And in particular in mills and steel manufacturing, there are a lot of like those big industries in Canada that we've seen a lot of decline in. There's some pretty great case studies of how selling shares to their employees have really converted those businesses from being on a downward trend to an upward trend. So it is possible. It's not to say it's not possible, but you want to make sure that there's a plan in hand so that your employees are going to succeed over the long term and your business will succeed over the long term. And you need to make sure that it's designed to meet both the needs of the owners and the employees. That will make sure you're successful over the long term. So considerations for design when you're exiting the company. So this is if you're thinking of retiring or selling the company. You can control the timing of your exit from the business with an ESOP, and you need to give consideration to what that's going to look like. You also, not only do you need to give consideration to what it's going to look like, you need to share that with your employees. If you're asking your employees to buy shares in the company and you are the head honcho and really the person that keeps the company humming, they're going to want to know what that looks like and how you're exiting and what that means for their share value. Because if you walk away and take the customer list with you, and those people had trust in you as the owner, but not necessarily in the rest of the company, that's risky for your employees. So communicating with your employees on what your exit strategy is and how you're going to make sure that the success of the company is transitioned over is really important. You can think of the sale of your company to an ESOP as creating a steady stream of retirement income. So you may, it's less likely that your employees are going to be able to buy your company up front in one shot. But if you think of them buying it out over a 5 to 10 year period, then it creates that steady stream of income for you. When you're designing it, as long as it's designed properly, you can realize significant tax benefits. So using the capital gains exemption, staggering your income over a period of time so that you're minimizing the tax on the sale of your company. And that you're motivating and rewarding your loyal employees. So that's one of the things that you want to take into consideration. So if your ESOP has been well designed, you want to make sure you're going to know that it's financially rewarding for your employees. That's going to be an outcome. That the financing of the purchase of the ESOP is simplified, that everyone can participate without having to scratch their heads and be confused about what's going on, that it's tax effective under Canadian income tax laws, that it's easy to understand and administer, that keep it simple principle, that's a key element to a well-designed ESOP. That it's integrated into the existing culture and the incentive program that you offer at your company, and that it gains employee participation. So you really want to make sure, I don't want to see any company design and implement an ESOP and then only have 5% of their companies participate. That's not the objective. I love seeing, I recently had a company that launched and they had 100% uptake of their shares, and I love seeing that right off the bat. So an ESOP can foster an engaged workplace, higher productivity, decreased turnover in your staff, increased innovation and creativity. Who doesn't want that in their company? Increased sales and improved job satisfaction, which are all things that I think we all want in our businesses. Some examples of ESOPs in Canada that you may recognize. These are some of the big examples. There's lots of others. And ever growing. So at ESOP Builders, we excel in helping companies implement ESOPs because we focus on culture, education, and communication in the ESOP development. We build trust, we enhance interest from employees, and we create structure. And we minimize the administrative complexity. I'm working with a company right now who they twice on their own tried to implement an ESOP, and they're a consulting firm, and they thought, we're smart, we can do this. And so they twice tried, and they twice didn't get anywhere. And then they finally engaged us to implement an ESOP, and they're like, this is so simple. And they're like, you must have a team of 100 people working behind you to get this done. But really, because we have the experience and knowledge in doing this, it makes it simple for us to do that, and really enables us to minimize the complexity for you. We also make sure that the tax implications are clarified and understood, which is a big piece for both the owner and the employees. And we instill realistic employee and owner expectations. So we're going to say things as they are and make things really clear and make sure that everyone understands what it's going to mean. And in a lot of companies, the question I get is, if I sell shares to my employees, does that mean that my employees can tell me what to do as the owner? And I always answer, no. As a shareholder in the company, they may have a voting share, they may not have a voting share. Up to you. And if they do have a voting share, they have a voting share on governance issues based on a percentage of their shareholding. It doesn't mean that they're making management decisions. The management structure exists, and that's differentiated. And those are the kinds of things that we talk about in our employee education sessions. So, if you think about your business goals, your vision, whether that's growing your current business or that's creating a succession plan in the future for yourself, can an ESOP help you achieve that? And just reflect on that and give that some thought. I'm happy to chat. This is how to get a hold of me, either by email or by phone. If you have any questions on how an ESOP could be relevant to your business, I'd be happy to chat with you about what that could look like. If you're interested in learning more, the ESOP Association Conference is a great way to not only listen to presentations from people who have experience in ESOPs, but also to network with other companies that have ESOPs in place and learn about what's gone well and what hasn't gone well. If things haven't gone well, there was a great comment by one of the presenters last year on how they implemented an ESOP, I think 20 years ago. And, you know, he wishes he knew all the things that we know now and the kinds of things we consider at ESOP Builders when we're developing our ESOPs, because they really muddled through a lot to kind of get to where they are today. So it's always good to have those conversations with other people as well.